Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, as it now is, wherever it is. Um, well, that was pretty much one of the things I wanted to show you from the Battles of Kiev, because I thought it was such an interesting way that the old battlefields of 41 was still used in 2022, and I had a hard time trying to figure out how to present it because, and you try to score something when you keep jumping between 41 and 22 in one sentence, just giving myself more work. And I have another episode which is only going to be about the Stalin line bunkers and forts and undergrounds, which are really lots of tunnels. They even had a subway that was that they were building under the river running through Kiev, Dnieper, where it didn't get to be finished, but they were planning on having a literal railway tunnel under the lake. And there's one section sitting left for that. But the Stalin line started being built all the way in the late 1920s. So they were constructing these bunkers. Now let me pull it up because someone asked where the lines were, and this is where they are. Okay, that's not the one I want to show you. How about that one so you can actually see what I'm talking about? Maybe I can actually even make this bigger somehow. Right. So generally speaking, the red line here is the Stalin line that was constructed from the late 20s, 27, 28. And then they stopped constructing in 1939 when the Russians and the Germans both invaded Poland. And let's not forget, they both invaded Poland. Just amazing how the Russians constantly never got blamed for that. But there's a whole lot of reasons for why they didn't, but they did. The Russians just waited for a week, 10 days to make sure the Germans had destroyed the Polish resistance, the Polish army, and for the West was seen to take the sole blame. But Hitler wouldn't have done it if he hadn't done a deal with Stalin. So Stalin is absolutely complicit in the invasion of Poland. Anyway, lecture over. The red line was where they constructed until 1939, and then they moved up to the green line, which ran through Poland, of course, skirted around. Wait a minute, did I pull up the wrong map here? This looks like the Molotov line more than anything else. Sorry, I wasn't actually prepared for this one. Let me see if I can find you a better one. There are better maps here. Stalin line border map. Postal. This is the wrong damn map I'm showing you. What's wrong with me? Let's get to the actual Stalin line. Anyway, and then they started constructing the Molotov line, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they met then in the center. Bloody hell, I'm not allowed to do that. I will show you, and then someone will keep an eye on all the questions, I'm sure. See, I had a very nice video map of this, but you would think that it would be fairly easy to pull these things up. Anyway, and there are some. Oh, actually, you know what? A fun little diorama. They actually. I'm not at the point where I need to start showing you people building models, but there are some very interesting. And if you see, I'll show you this. This is generally the bunker, the type of bunker, the artillery bunker we saw down by the river, by the Ipian River, where you had two artillery or howitzers sitting in a heavy casemate. This is what that bunker would have looked like. I think I had a picture up on the episode. But that's what they look like. And I'll go back to actually see if I can find you a proper map of what I was actually looking for you. Because you would think this would have been an easier thing to find on the interweb. But it's not. So I'm just going to have to... You're going to have to wait till the next episode, damn it. where I talk only about the Stalin Line bunkers. And these run through Belarus, and I know in Belarus they refurbished quite a few of these. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to visit at one point. There's still some of them are in Russia. There's more of them that runs through Ukraine that I wanted to visit, but because of the situation and GPS being selective outside the bigger cities in Ukraine right now, made it a little hard because some of them are, I have them by coordinate. And once I got outside bigger cities, GPS stopped working. And I could see myself trekking around for quite a while being lost there. So that's going to have to wait. And then, of course, they move forward to the Molotov line, where some of them runs through Poland, Czechoslovakia now, and again Belarus, and the ones in Poland that are running through Przemysl, and they kind of run through the just on the Polish side of the border in some cases. And I visited quite a few of them, and they were just as impressive. I was positively surprised. I was positively surprised. The Molotov line bunkers are built in the same vein as the Stalin line bunkers. However, um, they only had a year and a half after in late 1939 when the Russians and the Germans took Poland. Then everybody started building lines, and before that, the Poles had also built lines facing Prussia, facing Russia, facing Germany. So the Poles had built some really intricate bunkers as well that were really well made, and you'll see them too. And the Germans then built the bunkers facing the Poles as well from Prussia around Wolfslayer. One of the things you never see when you see Hitler's bunkers are all the defensive lines and the bunker lines and the bunker groups, the fortified groups. I will show you. Anyway, I'm sure you have some questions, and if you have any questions, this would be the good time because um, one thing I just saw was there's been a lot of talk about what happened in Bucha, and there's been a lot of gossip, and there's been a lot of forensic looking at the pictures. Now I was there, and uh, I've seen the documentation, and I would now, and I'm not saying that this is not where I'm saying, well, the Russians did war crimes, the Ukrainians did. This is the beginning. Everybody does. I've also heard from contractors that are fighting that they're Ukrainians that have killed Russian prisoners of war. And this is what I mean. This is where everybody starts doing horrible things to each other, and there's a lot of hatred going on, which makes it harder to fight. Say, well, the last honorable war that was fought by Rommel in the desert, as far as I seem to remember, with very little quarter. But it starts with the things that was something that happens like in Bucha, because you're in the very early days of the war, and you see civilians and you see soldiers being captured, hands tied behind their back, shot in the back of the head, and the soldiers who did it. Uh, and I'm saying they did it because yeah, they did it. Uh, because then they took their cell phones from the dead bodies and made phone calls home. And all of this is registered, of course, documented, which makes it really hard to run from, which makes it really stupid thing to do. And that's the interesting thing about Bucha is one thing, you have everything on drone footage. You also have all these CCT cameras sitting all over that filmed everything. And you had locals so hiding in the houses with the cell phones that videoed everything for that very reason. And you have video of civilians being tanks firing down point blank at people on bicycles, on minivans, with civilians fleeing. It's really hard to run from. And you have the documents that left behind by the 234th, and the commander was there. You have the Russians talking to him. You see him walking the street. He's around when his soldiers are doing this. So it's hard for him to run from not knowing. And there's always excesses in war. Ukrainians do it, Russians do it, Middle Easterns do it, Americans do it. Everybody has. There's always individual excesses, and that is one of the tragedies of human nature. Is you're fighting war and it's. I don't think that can ever be regulated, but it can certainly be curbed, because I remember when I was a recruit, and the academy and got everywhere every step of every military unit I've been to, we have read up on the laws of war. I seem to remember one of them being you don't shoot on parachuters dropping, and I'm wondering. I really thought it really annoyed me because when I went there, I genuinely thought the Russians being now a 2022 modern army of civilized people. I have lots of Russian friends. They're civilized, they're educated, they're doctors, they're human beings. And then I thought, well, maybe it's the ones from the outlying republics that did this. There are civilians that was telling me that, well, some of the Russian soldiers, they didn't even know how to use toilet paper. I think, well, they're certainly not Russians from St. Petersburg or Moscow. And then you see that the ones who was doing these excesses are from a recognized Russian frontline, well-trained unit that's doing this. It's not some backwoods farmer that was drafted and doesn't know any better. These are guys who should have known better. And that's what I mean. They should have known better. And from that, I'm saying, well, as you say, everybody does it. But the problem is this was the first week or two. So now this happened. Then, of course, you will have Ukrainians that will want to take revenge for that. And no, the commander, he was got an award. It's in the video. He got a well, I don't know if they killed him after that. I can't say. I haven't had that. I wouldn't be surprised, but to give him a medal after this, at least, and with respect to Russia, but have a show trial for God's sakes. Put somebody on trial. Yell at somebody. Fire. Put some non. I mean, that you have pictures of all the Russian soldiers who made phone calls home from the dead people's cell phone while the bodies were still warm. That's really damn hard to run from. And I'm pretty sure any cop in any jurisdiction would arrest you if you were found with a newly killed person's cell phone. It's hard to run from. And I'm just saying, listen, I don't want to take sides. I'm just telling you this is what happened. And I was there. I saw the bullet holes in the walls. You still see the marks, people with flowers on the graves. You saw the cars with the little teddy bears. And that's the one thing that really got me was the little teddy bears in the cars that were shot up. That's the ones where children were killed. And I understand that civilians get killed in crossfire. They get deliberately. I understand that. You get caught up and then you start shelling a town full of civilians. Well, civilians die. But when you have point blank firing on people on bicycles and cars that are fleeing, that's not how a modern army is supposed to behave. Anyway, I'm just saying, bring the people to justice who've done these things on all sides. I know there's 3 Russian that I know of, and you please don't send me millions of samples of how everything else. From one of the contractors, I heard that he witnessed Ukrainian soldiers shoot 3 Russian prisoners, and there's an investigation into this. That is all I know about that. So I'm not saying anyone is good or bad here. I'm just saying excesses happen during war, and this is the kind of thing. Let soldiers fight it out amongst each other, but let's observe the rules of war, because we're never going to stop waging wars. That's who we are as human beings. But let's try to adhere to some rules. We should at least be able to do that. And I find it far worse that the IKEA have stopped serving beef hot dogs in lieu of grasshopper, right, whatever the hell they're doing. I'm far more worried about the war on gasoline at this point and fossil fuels by these lunatics, which will starve and kill us all. I'm sorry, I just got a message in the middle of the show that no more beef hot dogs in IKEA in Poland. Like I said, I think Ukraine should stay independent of both the EU and NATO and keep Monsanto off its fields, keep everybody out and do business with everyone. Although I guess that is not really stop flying around my house, bummer. That's probably not really going to happen right now. Anyway, revenge is the worst, because when these things happen, then it just spirals. And that's why stop it, put a stop to it on both sides, Russian and Ukrainian. So, right, we can fight, but when we're done fighting, then it has to stop. And if you need to bring some of your own to trial in order to tell your own side that we're not doing this, um, I mean, I yeah. And the same thing is, like I said, well, if you're going to send aid, then moving on. All right, yeah, then send aid. Then send aid verified. But anyway, um, okay, yeah. Oh, don't get me started on the gender thing. Probably get shot. But yeah, we seem to have some. And I honestly, when I look at our corrupt government, or I look at the world today in the West, we have some serious problems. And I do not understand why people are not protesting some of these, because many of the problems we have are man-made, and they will lead to people starving or dying or worse. Uh, yeah, could we have the asteroid, please? Even the aliens are sitting behind the moon, scratching their heads, going like, "What the hell are these idiots doing?" Um, well, maybe we can convince Monsanto to go into the oil drilling business, and we can get them on our side. Um, and yes, giving you a catch up on the interview with Joseph. There will be, as far as I seem to remember, right here, machines here. There will be a mouse pad and a coffee cup with. I thought we did the probing around here, because we have to, and I will, of course, send one to Joseph, and I will also send Joseph a new microphone, because I noticed the volume levels were a bit off between us, which is annoying. Sorry about that. I tried to fix it in the way, but before we started, couldn't do that. And then somebody didn't like the way I was talking. Um, sorry, my damn channel. Not even beetle, it was grass and rice and vegetable vegan hot dogs. It was not a hot dog. Like a hamburger was not made of dead cows, not a hamburger. Um, was there ever real beef in hot dogs? No, it was bone and fat and gristle ground up and artificially steamed off the carcass. But still, it's. Let me see. What did she say? Plant-based hot dogs of vegan soy. Soy again. Soy. If you're a man out there, and stay away from soy. Soy is bad. It'll raise men's estrogen levels. So, and God knows there's enough that'll destroy manly men around here. So stay away from soy. No soy lattes, none of that feminine crap. Just put some milk and some latte vanilla in your coffee. Anyway, yeah, when the Germans start making sausages out of rice and vegetables and bugs, and that's the end of the line. That's the end of the world. Only Americans can have hamburgers with no ham. Well, it is interesting, because ham, doesn't that sort of, well, it either denotes a cut of meat or denotes pork. And it's a hamburger everywhere, but no one really had pork in their hamburger. Although I did have a hamburger, Polish/Ukrainian style in Poland. Well, it was. I'm prefacing that because it was by the East Wall. There's a little restaurant, little burger bar, and there was a Ukrainian girl working there, and I had never seen a hamburger like that before. I'm saying sometimes you'll see Germans lose their mind. They put sauerkraut in their hamburger. This was all sorts of strange things I have never seen, and I couldn't stop laughing. And she looked like she was terrified that I was laughing at her hamburger. And I'm like, well, that's not really what a hamburger looks like where I'm from, lady, but okay. I'm like, I can explain to you. But I figure, I don't know, I'll eat it, and it was a little strange. It was very strange, to be honest. But yeah, well, as long as it has dead cow in it, I'm happy. Oh, damn, the major's calling. Anyway, are there any specific questions to what we were just doing? Since we were just doing something. McDonald's is not a hamburger. McDonald's is not even a restaurant. It doesn't even classify as foods. Although McDonald's in certain countries, like France, they have actually a decent salad at McDonald's, which is obviously what I go to. If I go to McDonald's, I'm thinking about I want salad. Um, yeah, but that's what everything has to be easy now, within 15 minutes where you live, so you don't have to. That's what the 15-minute cities are. In case you don't know, the 15-minute cities. We are ranting about everything. I'm just waiting for any questions. If there are any questions, I'm just going to rant until I do. Um, the 15-minute cities is they want everything you need to be within 15 minutes, so you don't have to leave your area, save on gasoline, so they're going to take cars away from you. As they don't, well, them, I mean, Global Economic Forum, all these lunatics want to take gas away, want to take cars away, want to take private ownership of cars away. So if everything's within 50 minutes where you live, you don't have to leave your territory, and we can all do a Snake Plissken out of wherever the hell we live. Um, and that's kind of what they want to do, and yet no one seems to. What I think it's going to take to stop this war. Well, I saw Poland was withdrawing, was stopping to send any more aid, and I know there's rumblings going on here. The way it looks right now is no one is really winning this. On one hand, I'm fairly certain that the Russians do not want to take over all of Ukraine. Um, the Ukrainians are not currently strong enough to push the Russians out of the areas they've taken. Putin is not going to negotiate a deal where he has to withdraw from places he's taken. The Ukrainians are not voluntarily going to give up those areas because no Ukrainian politician could and survive that politically. That's a problem. Right now, they are short of a little grinding offensive that's going on from the Ukrainian side, from what I can see. You're looking at a World War I scenario where the Russians have dug in behind minefields, lots and lots of minefields and barbed wire, building pillboxes. And so you have World War I with drones. Everyone is stuck. The lines are somewhat frozen where they are. If the West stops sending aid to Ukraine, they're going to have to negotiate a peace with where they are and stop fighting eventually. Obviously, we are floating the Ukrainian military. They can hold with what we send them. They can possibly even take ground. And they could possibly even win if we keep sending them. And we maintain this for several years. We meaning the West. If there's a Western resolve to help the Ukrainians fight the Russians, and that continues, the Ukrainians can hold. If not, the Russians will start gaining ground to the point where they will start taking to the offensive, and it'll turn into it being necessary for some sort of a peace to be had made. Something has to be cobbled out, and probably something will be cobbled out where part of the eastern oblasts will remain Russian, and the rest won't. I would suggest, not that I have a whole lot of faith, having been part of one in UN missions, but maybe this is a place where the UN needs to go in and in the eastern oblasts, and between the fighting parties, keep them apart, keep civilians safe, and maybe oversee an honest election. If ever we have seen such a thing, that would be the best way. Have honest elections. But again, that's not really something that's in anymore anywhere. In Europe, you don't have elections. You just get told what to think and what to do and what to eat and how much your gas is. And in America, they just, well, we'll just print up ballots until whatever side wins who can print the most ballots. So why would we think that Ukraine is in any better shape than the rest of us? But yeah, that's the other thing. I'm reading. Sorry, my comments are there. My camera is there, so I have to look here to read that. Everybody's making money on this, except the people who are dying and having their houses destroyed. The lots of Russian soldiers that are press ganged into this. Lots of Ukrainian soldiers that probably rather do something else. Lots of soldiers who'd rather do something else are dying, as it always is. I will say that overall, the Ukrainian motivation amongst the soldiers and population to kick the Russians out are far stronger than the Russians is to take Ukraine or to win the battle. And that is just overall observation of what I've seen, interviews with prisoners, and but again, everybody's making money. Ukraine's making money. Washington, God knows how Washington keeps making money on this. All the weapons manufacturers. Have you noticed how this has turned into an enormous um, arms procurement season for everyone? I mean, the Poles are buying more weapons and tanks than the Germans had in World War II. Good for them, but everybody is buying it. There's a huge upswing in military procurement everywhere. Everybody's making money, except the Germans. They still can't even find how to pick a helmet. But so there's that. There's everyone is making money, and let's not even begin to say that there are not corruption going on in Ukraine that Westerners are making money on, because there is. And there are things that really needs to be cleaned up and ironed out. And I think that might also be part of, this is something Ukraine need to look at really carefully, uh, is to clean up their own stuff. Because if it seems like they're corrupt or they're wilching on free elections and so on, that might sour Western resolve to help them. And at some point in time, greed will get you in trouble. Do Ukraine have enough men to hold? Yeah, they do. They can still draw on 900,000 men left. And when I was driving through Western Ukraine, you see young weapons grade men everywhere. The bus drivers are there, the waiters are there, people going to school. There's lots of men not in uniform, also lots of men in uniform that are running around the hinterland. There's plenty of people to draw from. I would suggest maybe the Ukrainians should freeze the bank accounts of the weapons grade young men who has fled the country and not fought. And that's where I'm a bit of there's a little bit of a hard ass, because if your country is attacked, you send your women and children out if you can, and you stay and fight. If you're a man who can still lift a firearm, but if you're a 25-year-old gangster with nice tattoos and Benz AMG, why are you sitting in Warsaw playing tough guy with your stripper girlfriend instead of being on the front line, instead of 67-year-old granddad that I have seen both of? I'm not just pulling that out of guessing. That's something that would infuriate me. If somebody attacked America, do you think I'm going to flee to Europe? I was born in Denmark. If Denmark was attacked, don't you think I would make my way back there? There's just, some things are worth fighting for. And I think probably the Ukrainians should do a little bit more of rallying the people who have left to get their arse back into the fight. Instead of, but one thing that really impressed me with what I saw was Folksturm, which, by the way, John is with a B. Sorry, I've got that guy. Was the territorial guards, which are, come on, these are dudes who spent a week or two training on some of this stuff, who went off and basically kicked out the Russians from Kiev. There was old men, young boys, most of them with no military training, but they knew the area. And it's interesting because a lot of countries have, I think Tyrone, I think you were writing me about, sorry, I got a chopper going by. I think you were talking about British National Guards or Home Guards as well. But I know the Danish Army have a 3,000 man force, at least they have, back when they set up that, and to deploy. You have Home Guard, National Guard in Denmark deployed around the world. And that, I think, includes 6 months deployment, which I think is really awesome. But they are traditionally supposed to be the home defense guard of their area at home. Whereas if you take a state guard in America, you have a state guard, let's say, use California as an example. You have a northern and a southern component. You have crazy people up north. If there's a crisis up north, the southern component of the state guard moves up there. If there's a crisis down south, the northern come down here. Whereas in Denmark, if there's a crisis in your area, you rally in your own area because you know it better. You're there faster. Much better way of doing it. Just like the Ukrainians did, where they are deployed in the area they know where they are. They're not sent to the opposite side of the country, which is absolutely the way to go. And I tried to explain that to our previous general, but who is unfortunately no longer with us, um, that the best way to use National Guards and state guards was to have them deploy where they are. It'll be just quicker and far more efficient. Per the Danish and Ukrainian model, and in Ukraine, you've seen it work. You've seen them be able to uh, rally people from their low, and they had a lot of people that volunteered, and that's why you see people. A lot of people they fled in Kiev, and it was a nightmare. And from what I have heard and what I've seen, the gun laws is an issue. That's I'll just get to that, Jeff. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of people that fled to the point where the railway station was overrun by dogs and cats that couldn't make it onto the train. Where I'm saying, like, I would never have left my dog anywhere if he couldn't come, I wouldn't have gone. Honestly, God. The problem is they had a lot of volunteers. And first of all, the people who fled were the people who could afford to flee. A lot, not blanketly, but the ones who can get in a car, fill it up with gas, and drive to Poland or drive to the Western Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainians, they don't have cars. They couldn't just afford to pack up and leave. They didn't have that kind of money. That was is one thing. But then you had all the thousands and thousands of volunteers. They didn't have enough weapons for them to send them up, because you had far more people that wanted to go fight. A lot of them were older guys, which is really cool. The world is going to be saved by older dudes with common sense, and that goes for the West and America too. Once we've seen how the next generation have screwed things up, if we can still be bothered. No comfortable recliners. And if Ukraine had, just like Jeff said, a gun law like in America, then you would have thousands of Ukrainians that would already be armed, who would literally take to the street. And once people started getting guns, you would see a lot of civilian little gangs roaming around and just tossing Molotov cocktails at the Russians and then running away. You had little hits and runs, which was a big surprise to the Russians, because they had literally been told this was just going to be 3-day in quickly regime change. The West won't have time to react. They're going to welcome you as liberators. Ukrainians are tired of their corrupt regime. And all of a sudden, once you invade a country, that will solidify that country in a way. Pearl Harbor, 9/11, all of a sudden we may disagree internally, but you just attacked us and now we're pissed off. Same thing happened in Ukraine. Yes, there were skirmishes and wars there's fighting going on in the eastern oblast in Ukraine, but you have an established border that the Russians invaded. They did an invasion towards the capital. You can't run from that. Whatever reasoning they thought they had, the Russians still invaded another sovereign country. Although a lot of Russians do not think Ukraine is a sovereign country. I get it. A lot of Russians don't think that the Baltics or Moldova is a sovereign country, but separatist regimes that need to be brought back into Russia. And now we get into a little bit of a problem, because if you're going to start having that argument that they used to belong to us, well, in the 90s, Russia signed on to respecting those boundaries and those borders. So they sort of are their own nations. Sorry. They probably would have been way before if Russia hadn't sat on them during the anti-Cold War and after the communists took over after World War I. You can't just keep rewriting borders, although it happens all the time. Sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. It's part of human nature. But when you invade a sovereign nation, you are doing it with the risk of pissing off everybody in that nation to the point where they may actually take to the streets and fight you. See, that's the problem. I mean, I heard Russian soldiers talk about that. Well, the Baltics and Moldova, they're all separatists. They need to be brought back in as well. They want to make greater Russia. And I don't know if that must almost be seen. I don't know if we have any Russians here who want to talk to this, because I'll be curious as to what information are the Russians getting. I mean, you have to sort of call that propaganda if you are being told by the media that this is what you believe, that this is what you need to believe, that these are just runaway countries. They're sovereign nations. They're sovereign. They're recognized by your own government. They're recognized by other governments, independent nations. So you can sit and say, well, they used to belong to. Well, my family came from Prussia. I would like Prussia back. That means Poland have to give up quite a bit of theirs. and the Russians have to give up Kaliningrad, and then I'll reconstitute Prussia. I don't think that's going to fly really well. Norway used to belong to Denmark. I don't know. Well, okay, if Norway became part of Denmark, maybe a cucumber wouldn't be $70 there. Uh, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some objections. At some point in time, you go far enough back, everybody used to belong to somebody else. It's just not an argument for aggressive war. China take Taiwan. Oh yeah, that's coming. The Chinese who are with the Russians in Cuba. If we actually had a coherent government with some sort of intelligent foreign policy, which obviously we don't, they might have noticed that, we didn't like to have, Kennedy didn't like to have, ICBM sitting in Cuba. And now we have all our traditional enemies sitting over there and Chinese buying farmland around bases in America. We have problems and we're not doing anything about it. Not to mention the 6 million illegal aliens that came in here, but Europe sees that. How do you think U.S. will react to Russia made an alliance with Mexico and ballistic missiles in Mexico? Well, it's funny, Martin, that you should mention that because was it a couple of weeks ago there was a big parade in Mexico where there's a Russian military contingent marching, there's a Cuban one, Chinese were there marching in this celebratory thing that my barber was telling me about it. He's from Mexico. And I'm just saying, all our traditional enemies are represented in Mexico. They haven't set up ICBMs yet. They're probably going to be doing that in Cuba. And we're just sitting here being impotent, being overrun and destroyed, and either by illegal immigration. We have, 6-7 million illegal aliens running over our borders, just like in Europe. And all this is forced. This is not by accident. This is organized and forced, as it always have been. And again, we are just sitting as impotent people sitting around doing nothing about it. We'll have another election, have a cup of coffee, while our countries are being destroyed. This goes for Europe. The EU have done everything it could to destroy European nations' individual sovereignty. And America's, well, we're not allowed to be proud to be Americans. So we're looking at, I don't know. I really don't know. Well, we will. I'll take Norway back. I like Norway. I mean, see Norwegian girls. Hello, but still, the price of food in Norway. Oh God. I'm just reading up. This is very good. Hang on. This looked like an interesting question that you were all talking. I missed. Do I not think I like to eat? Yeah, Raymond, gotcha. Yeah, I'm also not eating grasshoppers and bugs and crap. No. Anyone here the Brazilian aircraft carrier? No, do tell us about it. Black Sea, I'm reading. Territory so far, I think Voltzman, I think Putin right now has what he, when you decide to invade another country, you have goals set for what you want to achieve. If you are a rational, forward-thinking person and military and general staff, you will have made contingency plans for if one thing doesn't work. Then you have, well, I want this. This is my ultimate goal. I want everything. If I can't have everything, I'll settle for this. And if that fails, I will at the very least have this. I think at this point, Putin has what he will at the very least settle for. He has he has 4 oblasts and landlocked to the Crimea. And that's sort of the least he can get away with, also telling his own population, if he was to have a peace now, if they were to settle on this, that we achieved this. I think they wanted regime change to a Russia-friendly regime. That was what I think. That's what they wanted, and that's what they expected, to the point where they were so confident based on the intelligence that they received. And mind you, a lot of these intelligence officers have been fired or transferred since. They thought. I don't think they made a contingency plan. I don't think they made a, well, we'll settle for this or this or this. I think they thought, we're going to get everything. We're just going to be a quick little invasion, show of force, change a government, done deal. No one will blink. It'll happen before the West can react, and there won't be any big fighting. I think that is what they thought they were going to get. And then they would sort of by proxy have the whole country without having to fight for it. Now that they have to fight for it, they have to rewrite the plans. And I think that's one of the reasons why they stopped fighting for Kiev, withdrew from all of that territory, and focused on the 4 oblasts down there, because I think that became the backup plan. Like, all right, this is not going as we planned. This is not going to be that easy. Let's take what we at least want, and that is the land corridor down to Odessa and down there to the Black Sea Fleet. That, I think, is sort of what they'll settle for. Foreign investors, 40 million acres. Yeah, with way too many people, including Bill Gates, are owning farmland in this country. And yes, a cucumber is, maybe it was $17. It was really, food is really expensive in Norway. Somebody from Norway here can testify to this. Oh, the sunflower seeds. Yeah, I remember that. The grandmother handing the Russian sunflower seeds for his pockets, so they would grow where his body felt. Yeah, I think the guy with the beard that was, I just had to put him in the video. The one was like, we'll kill you anywhere. You'll never leave alive. It was just telling. And I don't think that is exactly what a lot of the Russians had expected. And with that sort of resolve, it's not going to be easy for anyone. All right, Pierre. I knew I was going to get the dam. I was there when that happened. And I was kind of grilling the soldiers I was with, because I said, well, looking at there's two ways of looking at this. On one hand, if the Russians blew that dam, and I'm sort of tending to believe they did, tentatively, 60-40, because when that dam blew up, a lot of the Russian forward positions were swept away, and which is not really something you want to do, you would think. If you build up all these landmines or whatever have you, and then you blow up dam and flood it all, that doesn't seem like a practical thing to do. It actually seemed that benefits the Ukrainians more than the Russians. On the other hand, the Ukrainians did blow the dam up on the Irpin River up outside Kiev, but they did it in such a way it would flood slowly and could be repaired easily. And I think they would have done the same thing there. So it doesn't look like a Ukrainian MO to do. Then you always have the outside factor of a third entity, but I could see both sides benefiting from it and both sides having trouble with doing it. I'm leaning towards the Russians doing it, because God knows, when you look at Russian tactics and strategies and just small miscommunications, it is something they kind of do, because sometimes one hand does not talk to the other. And that's even within the military, you have entities, you have so many powerful entities that are not communicating, that I could totally see one side decide to do this without informing the other, and oopsie daisy, we drowned some of our own. And that was also the explanation I got from the Ukrainian military, was that, well, the Russians kind of do these stupid things. And they kind of do. That's another thing is now we're looking at the rainy seasons coming. When are we now? We're in October. Well, we all remember how the Germans got stuck in mud in Barbarossa when it came to around this time of year, and that's kind of where things are going to do. So now I think before the ground, there's going to be some offensives. And of course, the only other thing is when you have a frozen ground, when you get to winter, it's going to make a Ukrainian offensive easier because it's harder to dig in mines in frozen ground. But also, that'll also make it easy for the Russians. They are, after all, the kings of winter war, or at least they used to be. Biolabs. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting thing. I saw some very pragmatic people asking why there would be, and I haven't gotten the biolab story verified. I don't try not to talk about things I don't have verified or haven't heard from somebody I absolutely trust. But say, well, why would America build biolabs for in foreign countries when it's foreign countries that have a reputation for being corrupt, and we trust them, and why would we? What's the argument from level-headed analysts? And I keep saying, well, we did in China, we did in Wuhan. Why wouldn't we do it everywhere else? Why would you specifically not want to build dangerous research labs as far away from your own population as possible? That makes more sense to me, especially given the US and EU money that's been flowing into Ukraine for the past 10 years, which is another thing. You saw in 91 when Ukraine got their independence back. You saw EU flags being waved around, and all throughout Ukraine today, wherever I went, next to the Ukrainian flag was an EU flag. Despite Ukraine not being in the EU, they are certainly banking on it. And the EU and EU countries have spent a lot of money in Ukraine, built up a lot of things as far as I can see. I just don't think Ukraine should join EU, not because of, for the Ukrainian sake. And the argument from them was, well, we tried communism and the Russian system, that didn't work. The EU looks like a better option. And so, yeah, well, they bring in a lot of money and a lot of things, but they also want something for that. And they are going to destroy a whole lot of what you have. Bringing the Ukraine into the EU is going to cost all of European countries a phenomenal amount of money. And Ukraine needs an enormous amount of infrastructure. Now, the EU are completely anal nut jobs when it comes to everything. When it comes, the roads have to be straight, and we can't have too much noise, and we can't have too much this and too much that. And there's all rules over regulation, and the best of German tradition of how to ruin freedom, independence in a country. That's the EU. I'm not an EU fan at all, given how they're destroying individual European countries and flooding them with the refugees. You want to do that to Ukraine, but you also then you have to bring Ukraine up to EU level. That's going to cost a lot of money. Have you seen the power plants in Ukraine? They're fairly easy to, even if the Russians bomb them, they're back online fairly quickly because they're 50 years old and fairly easy to repair. But they're also polluting, and the roads are not exactly straight, and I don't know if the EU really wants to pay for this upgrade. Then you have, of course, EU is just as corrupt. It's just in a different way. It's not directly money in brown envelopes, but it's something for something. And it's far more something for something than it is for the good of all. Now it's becoming a surveillance state like everything else. So, yeah, exactly. It's even in Poland. I'm so disappointed when I saw they're selling bunks and vegan crap in Poland. I thought Polish had more sense than that. So you want to bring that to Ukraine? I don't know. I think Ukraine should stay independent, out of NATO, out of EU, and become its own strong NATO and nation and do business with everybody. But I would say clean up the corruption. But if Ukraine doesn't clean up the internal corruption, there's a very real fear that the Ukrainian leadership will lose support from the countries it desperately needs right now to sustain the fight. You see what happened with the Polish, how they left, and that seemed to have been something that started with an argument over grain trade, grain deals. Ukraine's now trying to sell their grain through Poland, through Europe instead, dumping the prices. Polish doesn't want it. Bad, stupid things were said, and problem. And the Ukrainian leadership really need to have an election. In Central California, abandoned medical research lab full of dead mice, broken refrigerators, and I was going to say, tell me where so I can go, but I don't really want to. Um, hmm. Yeah, as long as the Ukraine is next door to Russia, the EU will pay to upgrade their entire country to stopgap measure to keep Russia out of Europe's backyard. Yes, but it's going to be expensive. It's going to be very expensive. Um, yeah, the open borders. That I mean, the EU has open borders. They've been flooding the world, the EU with refugees who absolutely have a completely alien culture to any in Europe, and it's not working. They're not being integrated right, and there's too many of them that doesn't want to be. Um, it's turned it all to me. It all looks like communist Marxism under a different it's just on a different name. Um, well, that's an okay. Well, one thing is you have Russian leadership and you have Russian soldiers that we now have. We can hang up on war crimes trials in The Hague, but of course, well, they have to get there, and I don't think Putin, who is now wanted for war crimes in relating to, I believe it was some 20,000 children that was taken and sent somewhere to Russia. Not unusual for the Russians. So that's the thing. What makes it hard to, from the Russian point of view, if you know history, when you see the Russians repeating the same things they did for all the past wars, World War One and World War Two. Lots of atrocities, lots of kidnapping people, shipping them east back to Siberia, liberated by the Russians, have historically never been very good for the liberated people. But of course, so now you're going to go, are these people going to go to The Hague? Putin is not going to go. I don't think the oligarchs are up on trials yet, so they can probably still travel. Um, what about the soldiers? You have all these names from the 234th. They should ideally be handed over to The Hague for an honest trial. Evidence, trial, to see if they did it or not. Give them a fair trial. We laid out the evidence. I showed you a little bit of it, but let's get to the trial and actually make sure if they didn't do it, let them show up. They're not going to. Russia's not going to send their soldiers there. If they're captured in Ukraine and they're identified, they're probably going to be put on trial in Ukraine. So going to Hague, that's going to take that will probably take Russia being invaded itself, and that's not going to happen. Maybe we can send the illegals to Siberia. I'm good with that. That's just I'm good with that. Oh yes, history proves no one learns. Nobody did. Absolutely no one has ever learned. That's why they keep. Ever see Putin arrested for war crimes? No, absolutely not. And honestly, and there's the thing is, do we want to see Putin go? And so thinking about that, do we? Because what comes after? Is there one person who can take over? Well, Prigozhin was actually set as the number 2 guy. He in popularity to Putin just the day before his march on Moscow, which is probably a good reason why he decided to do a vertical dive without a parachute in a flaming wreck if he was on board. But who else? Medvedev, he wanted to start World War III. There are some Russian leaders that are far worse and less contained than Putin is. So if he goes, will Russia break up like it did in 91 into a whole bunch of infighting, more crime, more the nightmare it was in the early 90s? Or will somebody worse take over? Will somebody more peaceful take over? That's the problem. Right now, you know what you have. Remember when those wonderful, glorious, intelligent people, the Clintons, did when they got rid of Gaddafi? Well, that was just brilliant because Gaddafi was keeping the gates closed to Europe for all those African refugees that are now flooding into Europe. And Gaddafi even said, they're not going to get rid of me because I'm the gatekeeper to Europe. So they got rid of him. It's all deliberate. But do you really want to get rid of Putin because you don't know what's coming next? And this whole regime change thing, I'm not a big fan of that. I think the local populations and the individual countries need to figure that out on their own. You know, like all the countries in the EU should probably start thinking about who they're voting for really, really quickly because they're running out of time. I think we're all running out of time. Um, yeah, if he keeps starting wars or keeps doing this, yeah. But I mean, it takes two to tango. And I'm not saying that yes, Russia absolutely did invade a sovereign nation. Was there a whole lot of provocations and reasons therefore? Yeah, there was. I could see the point of view. I could certainly see that NATO had lined up the cards to give Putin the justification he needed to his own people to do what he did, uh, to a large extent. I don't think we can entirely. Plus, we don't exactly know what's going on inside Ukraine, inside the political system. When you look at how our corrupt president and son and family and so on have been interfering in Ukraine and laundering money and doing things, what or why and how and for what? There's a lot more to that story. Though I'm more interested in finding if we're going to figure that out or not. Um, okay, you know what? Here's an interesting question. That's actually really I like this. If you have to start lining up George Soros or that Muppet in the mountain up in Switzerland, Schwab, the Clintons, does Putin look like the bad guy? I'm just saying. If you look at what Klaus Schwab, and the World Economic Forum is advocating, do they look like the level-headed people, and do Putin look like the crazy one? And I don't know if you've actually listened to what Schwab and Soros and Nutjob and all these crazy people have been saying. World Economic Forum. I'm reading this one. I'll get right back to you. Where are you? I'm just saying, if you line these people up and you listen to what Schwab is saying, and in the future you will own nothing and be happy, and all that's nonsense, and let's give up cars and have a couple of billion people die. I'm sorry, but Putin looks far more balanced as a world leader than these people that are now have half of the European leaders in their pocket. I'm just this is completely out of random comparison, but if I had to live in a world, that would be a hard choice. Would I want to live in Russia or under a Merkel, Schwab, Soros world? Ooh, I don't know. I think I do know, but I don't think I want to tell you. That's scary. We have people in the West that are so crazy that they make the Russian leadership look sane. That is terrifying. Do I think, Belarus and the Chechens will give help to Putin in Ukraine? The Belarusians won't. The Chechens are. Do we actually know if he's still alive? I heard that he was in the hospital. Sorry, the Chechen leader. I heard he's in the hospital with kidney failure, but again, not verified. The Belarusians will not, because Belarus has a standing army of 10,000, and then a whole bunch of more reservists and recruits, and they're not going to want to go to war in Ukraine. You have Belarusians that's fighting in Ukraine, but they're fighting on the Ukrainian side. There are Belarusians that were sabotaging the Russian supply lines in Belarus. I will go as far as to say and I can't for life remember his name right now, but if the Belarusian leader were to magically fall off a chair or finally drown himself in vodka, from what I understand, that's a possibility. If Belarus had a significant change of leadership, I could see the majority of Belarusians would probably rather swing towards the West in a Western style democracy than towards the East. From what I'm hearing, I mean, Belarus is a communist country in the good old style. But what they did differently when the wall came down is they kept all the heavy and big industries owned by the state, whereas Russia said to some degree privatized. So it is still very Lutvenko, yes, thank you. It's still very controlled in that sense. You still have the big red stars in the airports, and Belarus is interesting, but I don't think there's just been lots of surveys and talks about that the Belarusians would literally leave the military and quit and resign if they were told to attack Ukraine. I don't think there's any chance. Like I said, they have a standing army. If they had a huge internal police force, just like at this point in time, that Russia have upped their spending on their internal police force far more than to the military percentage wise, which is if Ukraine really was the biggest focus and danger, why are the Russians spending so much more money on their internal police, Rosguardia, than they are on their frontline soldiers? I think Russia has more of a keener eye on internal unrest um, than they see Ukraine as the. Ukraine was not a danger to Russia. They were not going to. Ukrainians were not going to invade Russia. Um, yeah, there are Belarusian troops being trained by Wagner. Although from what I heard, most of the Wagner guys have left Belarus. From what I've heard, uh, and a lot of them are in Africa um, instead, because they apparently weren't very happy with the facilities and situations in Belarus, which is a very poor country. Let's not hey Paul, let's not kid ourselves with that. And also, again, someone in Russia just killed Prigozhin. It doesn't really matter who did it; he's dead, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the guys in Wagner. And I would love to have one of the guys from Wagner come on and do an interview and tell me everything that what's going on with them, um, especially with their security measures on putting all their leadership in one plane. I really want to talk to somebody from Wagner and explain to me how in the hell all their top leadership made it in one plane in that situation going in that direction. Anyway, false flags in the government can achieve. Yep. Oh, and we're going to see a lot of false flags. The next year is going to be a nightmare, and that'll pretty much decide that if there's still any chance for civilized world and the combustion engine. So again, I don't think I think a lot of the Wagner guys would see the Russian leadership as having been responsible for killing off Prigozhin and his men. And I'm not saying necessarily that Putin did it. I'm saying there's just the biggest possibility that Shoigu did it, because Shoigu was the target for Prigozhin and Wagner's uprising. It was never Putin. Wagner didn't march on Moscow in order to get rid of Putin. Not at all. They did it to get rid of Shoigu. And I think Prigozhin completely misunderstood how connected Shoigu is. Um, um, because Shoigu was even part of getting Putin into power. Shoigu has been in every Russian government since '91. He's very well connected, and he's made a lot of money, meaning he has a lot of friends who's also making money from knowing him. He's well connected, and that's why he's not just somebody you can get rid of. And I think Prigozhin had overplayed his hand by thinking that, or unless somebody suggested to him that was the case. Window companies are making a killing in Russia because they always need a place in window. Well, a lot of windows in Ukraine need fixing too. Speaking of, yeah, no, I'm sure the Wagner organization have new leadership in place, but they still had two or three of their most charismatic leaders lost, which it still does damage. It was what I mean, and I'm certainly it's not something that they will forgive. I mean, of course they wouldn't. I certainly would hope they wouldn't. Um, mm, I'm thinking I'm just reading questions since I'm obviously losing my voice for some strange reason. Taking away better. I mean, I think Shoigu taking over or staying in his post is probably better for the Ukrainians. I mean, I think they sent didn't they send him a thank you note on the first days of the war for having allowed corruption to destroy the Russian military. I think that was the story that the Ukrainians did that. Um, I don't think Shoigu is particularly well liked, and the people who are well liked have been fired. They had some really good generals. That was generals that the troops truly trusted and liked, but who spoke out about their needs and problems, and they got fired. And I can't remember some of their names at this point. Speaking about something else, it was anti-aircraft. We don't know if it was a bomb or it was a missile. I heard both, and it doesn't matter. It again, it really doesn't matter how the plane was brought down. I mean, you can start boy, if it was a bomb placed on the plane, it was probably more people could have done it. It was an anti-aircraft missile or a plane. Fewer people would have the ability to make that happen. But it doesn't matter. We all pretty much have a good idea of who to blame and who will be seen as the ones who are to be blamed, which is kind of the important part. Who will be seen as the one who did it? And who does the Wagner guys see as who did it? And they actually bent on revenge, or are they just laying low because they do have families in Russia? So I don't know what's going to come of that. But anyway, my friend with a tank tank museum in Poland has all these running tanks and APCs that he will gladly, when we do our tour next year, we have to do a tour through Poland and see some of all the forts that I'm going to show you over the next couple of months. And we can spend a day there, and you can all be trained as tank drivers. We can stay there. We can stay there in the old barracks belonging to Guderian's regiment. I'll show you Guderian's house, and which is still there. It's for sale, actually. It just doesn't have a roof. Bit of a problem. Oh, the dogs. I have a dog neighbor that always barks when I talk to a microphone. It's a thing. Whenever I do voiceovers, whenever I reach for that microphone, he starts barking. I actually asked to babysit the poor guy because I figured, well, if he's home alone barking, he may as well sit here and not bark, but then he won't be alone. Anyway, so yes. Anyway, yeah, his puppy sits up here, and every time he's home alone, and every time he sees other dogs walking around, he barks. Poor guy. Anyway, I can't seem to be talking anymore. I don't know. I think I sat in the air condition yesterday, and AC for a while will screw you up. So there, and so yes, I am going to go do stuff. We have an interesting. I had to get this Kiev episode done, just like I had to get the Battle of Warsaw episode done. Editing these shows, can I have like a little piece here for a minute? Editing these shows always revolves around what do I tell you first, because there's usually a reason why there's an order. Sometimes there's a bunch of shows that are standalone that you can just watch. You don't need an order. But a lot of times, I have to tell you something, or show you something before I show you something else, so it makes sense. And the Battle of Warsaw was really important to show you because all the interesting forts around there, around Modlin, I'm going to show you now. They're insanely cool. You've never seen anything like this before. You really haven't. They're really amazing. But I had to show you how it started to show you all of them. The same thing with Kiev. I had to show you the battles of Kiev and a little bit of how I had to do this. So now we can just do the Stalin line, and then we do the Molotov line, then we do the Polish bunker line, then we can do the bunker lines around Hitler, Wolfslayer. There's lots of bunkers everywhere, and lines. There's lots of fortified lines, a lot more than you've ever heard of. West Wall, East Wall, that's just two of them. So everybody built lines, and a lot of them are way more elaborate than I thought. But I had to sort of show them to you in order for it to make sense. So there, and Lord knows, I hope this war in Ukraine ends really, really soon, so I can get to Russia, because I would really like to go and see some of the World War II sites. Yes, please, somebody find me a Wagner guy who wants to talk, do an interview. He can do it anonymously. It's okay. If he speaks English, it'll be okayer. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's interesting when I hear Russian soldiers talk about, and it's interesting because I also hear what I want to try to hear what everybody says, and when they talk about the corrupt transgender agenda, Western destruction of civilization or culture, history, religion is a big deal in the East. The further east you go, the more religious they are. Poland, Ukraine, Russia, they have a sense of religion now. I understand they don't want some of the nonsense that we're doing in the West moving east. I don't understand why the Poles are embracing this. I'm so disappointed that you can get locust and grasshoppers and vegan sausages in Poland. I am really, truly disappointed. I do not know, of course, I know who Jesse Ventura is, but I don't know him. Although he seems like a really cool guy to have a cigar with, and I would absolutely love to. But a lot of things Jesse Ventura said and did, he was also right about. There's all I can say is, could you stop unloading dumpsters here? Thank you. I live by the beach. Hello. Could we not have this noise? Ivan Besimov. Look up Ivan Besimov and listen to what he said. He's a KGB defector. And in 85, he did a lot of speeches. And you really need to see what he said then, because everything he warned us was going to happen is happening. A very foresighted man. And of course, the West, as idiots as we are, do not listen. And if we don't, for the Western civilization to rise, we have to actually start people actually have to start protesting and taking to the streets and really objecting to the agenda that's being put forth. Unfortunately, the media is not on their side. The media is lying, outright lying, and fear-mongering to make people so scared that they're ready to glue themselves to road because of a threat that has nothing to do with automobiles or cow meat. We have these insane people in power, in positions of power, and no wonder the Russians don't want it. I just don't understand why the Ukrainians would want it, or the Poles or anyone else in the Eastern European would want it. We don't want it, but we're not doing anything about it. We're just letting it happen, because where's the demonstration? Where's the outcry? What's the protest? I have gasoline here who's over $7. And if you're in Europe, you go like, only $7. Stupid American. But for California, 3 years ago, gasoline here was like $2.40. The food I buy now is 300 or 400% more than 3 years ago. And people are voting. People voted for this. We knew if you're going to put these people in office, this is what's going to happen, and it is. And no one seems to put that together. So when you have your country overrun by immigrants, or you have your food prices triple, or your gas prices double, or you can't get gas and you can't get the car you want, well, then you have to look at, well, who did you vote for? When people complain, ask them who they voted for. Because chances are they probably voted for somebody who let this happen. And this is where people need to start waking up. And with a couple hundred people we have here in the chat, we know, but we're not enough. And the great machine out there, it's an uphill struggle. We could have everything. We could have an awesome world and an awesome life. And we have collectively, not all of us, decided to let lunatics in charge and destroy everything. And we are just letting it happen. But it's time to start writing, whoever your representative is, whoever your government is in charge, and a lot of letters and a lot of emails. And maybe it's time to actually start organizing protests, peaceful protests. but strength in numbers. And there's a lot more on the normal common sense side than the others. The others are just, no, a lot of them are actually paid to protest. And I know this because I work in the film business. I saw when they were before the 2020 election, I saw in acting casting breakdowns. They were casting for one place, I think it was in Phoenix, for anti-Trump protesters. They were casting for 500 of them, paid $378 a day. A lot of the protests you see, a lot of these idiots running around pretending to be something or other, they're just paid. They're paid instigators. And you can sometimes find their actual hiring process in acting breakdowns. So not everything you see is so, and you're not alone. And you really, really need to know that you're not alone. And if you're here, you probably common sense person who love your country, whatever country that is, and you kind of probably have a little bit of common sense. You probably like your food. I don't see a lot of vegans here. Sorry, not the vegans. Probably don't see a lot of Prius drivers here either. I know Prius drivers that are normal people, but I will continue to rag on them just because, that's what we do. But if you're here, you're looking around the world and you go like, what the hell's going on? Am I alone? You're not alone. And if the more people you talk, I live in Los Angeles and I hardly ever meet any crazy liberal blue-haired nut jobs. I don't. I hardly ever do. I have never had any problems. I know people who have been yelled at for wearing an American t-shirt flag and stuff like that. Never. I've never seen it. I don't have it around me. People I meet even in the film business, I never meet those crazy radical people that you always hear about. You keep telling me they're here. Why not meet them? So, yeah, Ivan Besimov, definitely look up his speeches. There's a couple on YouTube, an hour, and then there's a 4 hour with everything he said. Very, very smart. And but just what I'm saying is, you're not alone. You're really not. And providing we're all still here, I will expect to do a 2-week tour. Well, we're going to get a little tour bus, and we're going to go around look at some cool places in Poland and Germany next year. And I couldn't make it work this year because I still have to go out there at least one more time to set up all these places, meetings, get everything, make sure. One thing is me sneaking through a gate or jumping a fence alone, but if we show up with a bus with 20 of us, let's get the paperwork in order because you actually have time to enjoy searching around, not being chased off by somebody. So hopefully we have something to look forward to next year, and we'll find some bunkers, and then we'll just occupy them until the election is over. So there. Anyway, yeah, and I thought about it. I wanted to do a French-Belgium tour. Germany, there's just not a lot of stuff that's interesting to see in Germany. With a couple of things around Berlin we can swing around and take a look at that are still fun, but the Germans and bureaucracy, either it's destroyed or it's hiding or it's impossible or it's illegal. And I'm not going to get 20 of us or how many we can fit in a bus arrested by the Stasi. So Poland is definitely, that's just where there's so much interesting stuff to see that we can see. I think if we're going to do part of the Germany, we're probably going to go through Jonastal and go through Berlin, get a tour of Maybach and some of the stuff in the forest, and then maybe Peenemünde, and then head east. But you'll see over the next couple of months, you'll see some of the episodes are done from some of these places. You can see what you kind of like, and then we'll start chatting about that when we get into the January, February, and we'll see what we can see. East Wall, definitely worth a visit. There's a lot of really interesting places that can be seen, and more of them in the East that you haven't seen. Plus, it's a lot cheaper. Your money will go a lot further in Poland than it will in France or Germany by a mile. Rammstein. Well, last time I tried to get into Rammstein, I was just trying to do my laundry, and they looked at me really weird, probably because there was a dead deer imprint on the hood of the car. But yeah, it'll be interesting to get a tour of Rammstein. I mean, they have a PAO somewhere. I'm a PAO. Sure. But there's a couple of places around Rammstein. If we're in Jonastal, it's not that far. I mean, it's also about it's also about selecting places that we don't have to drive waste too much time driving between, because I mean we want to, everybody's spending money to go to get to a place. We don't want to waste too many 8-hour trips getting from A to B. I mean there will be those because we're driving all over Europe, but if we go too far one way, there'll be a lot of wasted time driving. I also want to try to. It's about finding all the places that so we can have something interesting every day, and hopefully 2 or 3 things, 4 things, and you shall see. I'm thinking springtime. Um, when am I thinking? That's an interesting question. Uh, May, probably. April, May would be nice. Days are a little longer. The bugs are not quite awake yet. Probably that'll probably be the April, May. Um, and I know that Caveat Mr. Jones have a driver with a bus. So no, there's not stars anymore, Raymond. I was just referring to certain entities of the European bureaucratic police. I was making a rude and horrible and ill-in-place joke that if you're in Germany, you'll definitely know what I mean. All right, guys. I don't know why I'm losing my voice, but since somebody complained about my voice anyway, I'm gone. Time for coffee and gym, and I'll go to France too. I gotta go. There's some stuff. We're moving down from Roger and I. When I say we're moving down from Verdun down to Toul, and because all these main cities of France was surrounded by interesting fortresses that was built different than others. So there's also more to see. There's plenty of more to see, plenty of stuff to see. Don't you worry. And anyway, I'm sorry. Did you machine? What do you want? Oh, by the way, the radio station of Sidlitz is closed for some sort of rebuilding something. I don't know what they're doing to it. I went by the one where they're using the Germans used as an excuse for invading Poland, or as part of it. That is closed for some strange reason. We went there, took a picture of the building. The end. The antenna is still there, which is stupidly impressive, actually, considering it's made of wood, and it's still there 110 years later, 110 meters tall, made of like, birch. Anyway, all right, you all. I will chat to you. I have no idea what you're going to see next week. I really don't, but I'll figure that out when I had some more coffee and I have awoken. And chat with you all. Be well, be safe, and remember, you're not alone. There are more people around you that are not insane. God, I hope there's